It started with a phone call at 11:47 p.m. "Hey, Liam, I know it's late, but can you cover the night shift at the warehouse tonight?" Emergency came up. "Rick, my boss," muttered into the line. I hesitated. Night shifts weren't my thing. Too quiet, too many shadows. But the thought of overtime pay was enough to make me agree. The warehouse wasn't in the best part of town. A sprawling, dimly lit structure with aisles stretching endlessly into the dark. It always gave me a bad vibe. As I pulled into the gravel lot, the hum of the flickering overhead light outside the entrance set the tone for the night. It was silent, too silent even for midnight. I clocked in, grabbed the flashlight from the desk, and checked the schedule. My job was straightforward: patrol the aisles, ensure nothing was out of place, and keep an eye on the monitors in the security room. A glorified babysitter for boxes of inventory. The first hour passed uneventfully. I wandered between towering shelves of pallets and crates, the sound of my boots echoing against the concrete floor. Occasionally, I'd stop to listen. Sure, I heard something, a shuffle, a faint tap, but there was nothing. Back in the security room, I stared at the wall of monitors. They displayed grainy footage of empty aisles and motionless shelves. Every now and then, static would distort one of the screens. I chalked it up to outdated equipment. Around 2:30 a.m., as I was sipping a coffee that tasted like cardboard, the motion detector alarm went off. The red light on the panel blinked aggressively, indicating movement in aisle 6. I grabbed the flashlight and headed out. My footsteps echoed louder now, my pulse quickening with every step. Aisle 6 was one of the older sections, filled with outdated equipment no one cared about anymore. As I rounded the corner, I stopped dead. There, in the middle of the aisle, was a stack of boxes that hadn't been there before. They were neatly piled, but the edges were frayed, as if they'd been torn open and hastily resealed. I approached cautiously, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the gloom. My breath caught when I saw the stains on the floor. A dark, sticky trail leading away from the boxes and disappearing around the corner. Great, a raccoon or something, I muttered, trying to convince myself. But the hairs on the back of my neck were standing on end. I followed the trail, each step heavier than the last. It led to the fire exit at the back of the warehouse. The door was slightly ajar, swinging gently as if someone, or something, had just slipped through. I shone my flashlight through the gap but saw only darkness beyond. The trail stopped abruptly at the threshold. Deciding not to step outside, I secured the door and turned back. That's when I heard it. A faint, wet sound, like someone slurping or chewing. It was coming from deeper inside the warehouse. "Hello? Is someone there?" I called out, my voice trembling despite my attempt to sound authoritative. The sound stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. And then the lights went out. The darkness was suffocating. My flashlight flickered, the beam barely penetrating the shadows around me. I gripped it tighter, scanning the aisles for any movement. "Power outage," I whispered to myself, though I wasn't sure who I was trying to convince. The air was colder now, almost damp. I felt it on my skin, a clammy touch that didn't belong in a dry warehouse. I stepped back towards the security room, but every step seemed louder than it should have been. Like the echo was too long, too unnatural. And then I heard it again. That wet, slurping noise came from somewhere to my left, deeper in the warehouse. I froze. "Rick," I called out. Stupid. Rick wasn't here and I knew it. The noise stopped again, replaced by silence so heavy it pressed against my ears. My heartbeat thundered in my chest as I took a tentative step forward, the flashlight trembling in my grip. The beam caught movement ahead, something darting across the aisle, low to the ground. It was too quick to make out any details, but the way it moved, it wasn't human. "Okay, nope, I'm out," I muttered, backing up. My brain was screaming at me to leave, to walk out of the warehouse and never look back. But then a faint glow caught my eye. On the far end of the aisle, in the direction the thing had disappeared, was a faint bluish light. It pulsed faintly, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I couldn't explain it, but I felt drawn to it. Against all better judgment, I moved closer, the light growing brighter with each step. As I turned the corner, I saw it. A large, cylindrical object resting in the middle of the aisle. It looked like a metal canister, about 4 feet tall, with glowing cracks running along its surface. A faint hum emanated from it, vibrating through the floor and up my legs. "What the hell is this?" I whispered, stepping closer. As I reached out to touch it, the hum grew louder, almost deafening. The cracks in the canister widened, and a thick, black liquid began to seep out, pooling at the base. I stumbled back, my flashlight catching the glint of something moving inside the liquid. It slithered and pulsed, forming shapes that almost resembled limbs. And then the thing came out. It unfolded itself from the puddle like a spider unfurling its legs, its body glistening with the black ooze. It wasn't huge, maybe the size of a large dog, but its proportions were wrong. Its arms were too long, ending in sharp, bony claws. Its face, or what I assumed was its face, was featureless, a blank, smooth surface that reflected the light. It didn't make a sound as it turned toward me, but I felt its attention like a weight pressing against my chest. My instincts kicked in, and I bolted, my boots skidding on the slick concrete floor. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see how fast it could move. I reached the security room and slammed the door shut, locking it with trembling hands. My breaths came in ragged gasps as I scanned the monitors. One by one, the cameras showed the same thing. The black liquid spreading like veins across the floor, creeping through the aisles. And then, in the corner of one monitor, I saw it. The thing was standing in front of the security room door, its featureless face tilted as if it could see me through the steel. It raised one long clawed hand and slowly scratched at the door, the sound like nails on a chalkboard. And then, without warning, the monitors went black. A voice came through the intercom. Not a voice. My voice. "Liam, open the door." The sound of my own voice coming through the intercom made my stomach twist. It wasn't just similar, it was exact. The inflections, the tone, the nervous tremor I'd had earlier in the night. "Liam, open the door," it repeated, softer this time, almost coaxing. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to stay still. My mind raced. This can't be happening. This isn't real. But the deep scratches on the door and the black liquid spreading across the monitors said otherwise. Then it spoke again, this time louder. "Liam, I know you're in there. Open the door, buddy." The word buddy made my skin crawl. Rick always called me that, but now it felt warped, wrong. My hands shook as I fumbled with the walkie on the desk, desperately trying to reach someone. "Hello? Is anyone there? This is Liam at the warehouse. I need help. Something's..." A loud bang on the door made me drop the walkie. The thing outside was pounding on it now, the sound reverberating through the small room. I backed away, pressing myself against the monitors. And then it spoke again, this time using Rick's voice. "Liam, come on. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Just open the door, buddy. I can explain everything." I stared at the door, my breath caught in my throat. No way that's Rick. But how did it know his voice? How did it know mine? The pounding stopped. Silence. I didn't trust it. My eyes darted to the monitors, hoping for some clue as to where it had gone. But the screens were still black. Then, from the corner of the room, came a sound that made my blood run cold. A drip. Just one at first. Then another. Drip. Drip. It was coming from the ceiling. I slowly tilted my flashlight upward, the beam catching the spreading stain of black liquid leaking through the tiles. The hum I'd heard earlier was back, growing louder. And then the tile above me shattered. The thing dropped down, landing with a wet thud just feet away. Up close, it was worse. The black liquid coated its skin like oil, its claws gleaming under the flashlight. Its featureless face twisted unnaturally, like it was trying to decide what shape to take. And then it spoke. But this time, the voice was mine again. "Liam," it rasped. "You're not going anywhere." Adrenaline kicked in. I grabbed the nearest thing, a heavy wrench from the desk, and swung it with everything I had. It connected with the creature's side, and it let out a high-pitched screech that shook the walls. The thing staggered, its body convulsing as the black liquid bubbled and hissed where the wrench struck. Not wasting a second, I bolted for the door, yanking it open and sprinting down the aisle. Behind me, I heard the creature's limbs scraping against the floor as it pursued, its guttural screeches echoing through the warehouse. I ran blindly, my flashlight bouncing wildly. The exit was just ahead, the green exit sign glowing like salvation. But as I reached it, the door wouldn't budge. "No, no, no," I yelled, slamming my shoulder into it. The lock wouldn't give. Behind me, the screeches grew louder, closer. I turned, my flashlight catching the creature as it skittered into the aisle. Its featureless face twisted again, this time forming a grotesque mockery of my own features. It grinned, a horrifyingly human expression on an inhuman face, and then it lunged. The creature leapt toward me, limbs outstretched like jagged blades slicing through the air. I dove to the side just in time, my shoulder slamming into a metal shelf. Boxes toppled to the floor, scattering their contents everywhere. The thing hit the door with a deafening crash, its claws screeching against the steel as it turned toward me again, faster than anything that size had a right to be. I scrambled to my feet, grabbing a jagged piece of broken pallet from the floor. My hands shook as I held it in front of me like a makeshift spear. The creature stopped, tilting its grotesque mockery of my face as if studying me. Its grin stretched impossibly wide, black liquid dripping from its jaw. "Liam," it whispered in a voice that was both mine and not mine. "There's no point running. This place is already mine." It stepped closer, its movements slow, deliberate, like it was savoring the moment. I glanced around, desperate for an escape. My eyes landed on the fire alarm on the wall behind the creature. An idea formed, risky and stupid, but my only shot. "All right, you freak," I muttered, tightening my grip on the pallet shard. "Let's do this." I charged, yelling as I swung the wood at its head. The creature dodged easily, its movements unnervingly fluid. But I wasn't trying to hit it. I barreled past, slamming into the wall and yanking the fire alarm with all my strength. The warehouse erupted in chaos. Red lights flashed, and the blaring alarm echoed through the space. The creature shrieked, its head snapping back as the flashing lights disoriented it. It hated the sound. Seizing the moment, I bolted again, weaving through the aisles as the thing thrashed and screamed behind me. I didn't dare look back. My legs burned, lungs screaming for air as I reached the loading dock at the far end of the warehouse. There, I saw it, the manual override for the loading doors. The creature's screeches grew louder, and I could hear its claws tearing through shelves as it gave chase. I threw myself at the control panel, slamming my hand onto the override button. The massive loading doors groaned as they began to rise, letting in the cold night air. But they were too slow. The thing was on me in seconds, its claws raking across my back. Pain exploded through me as I stumbled forward, hitting the concrete hard. I rolled onto my back, just in time to see the creature towering over me, its form blocking out the flashing red lights. It raised a claw, ready to strike. And then the sprinklers came on. Water rained down from above, soaking everything. The black liquid coating the creature's body began to bubble and hiss like acid, steam rising as it writhed in agony. It stumbled back, screeching louder than ever, its form convulsing and twisting as the water ate away at it. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I crawled toward the open loading door, every movement sending waves of pain through my back. The creature let out one last, ear-splitting scream before it collapsed, its body dissolving into a pool of black sludge that spread across the floor. I dragged myself outside, collapsing onto the gravel lot. My vision blurred, and the last thing I saw before passing out was the faint glow of flashing red lights behind me. When I woke up, it was daylight. The lot was filled with police cars, their lights flashing silently. Paramedics were loading me into an ambulance as officers swarmed the warehouse. Rick stood off to the side, looking pale and shaken. When our eyes met, he gave me a weak wave. What happened?" I croaked, my throat dry. "You tell me," Rick said, his voice trembling. "When I came in this morning, I found you lying out here. The warehouse is trashed. Looks like something tore through the place. I wanted to tell him everything, but the words wouldn't come. How could I explain what I saw? Who would believe me? But then, as the paramedics lifted me into the ambulance, I caught a glimpse of something on the ground near the loading dock. A faint, black stain, seeping into the concrete. It's been 3 weeks since that night. I've barely slept. At first, I thought the lack of rest was from the nightmares. Endless loops of the creature's featureless face, its claws, the sound of my own voice coaxing me into the dark. But the truth is worse, much worse, because I'm not sure that night ever really ended. The black stain at the loading dock never went away. The cleanup crew couldn't explain it, and neither could the hazmat team the city brought in. It's just there, etched into the concrete like a shadow that refuses to leave. The warehouse shut down indefinitely. Rick stopped calling, and honestly, I haven't bothered to follow up with him. I can't bring myself to go back to that place, not even to grab my last paycheck. But the thing is, it didn't stay there. It started with small things. A faint tapping on my apartment door at night. My name whispered in a voice that sounded like mine but wasn't. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, a lingering trauma from the attack. Until the first night it appeared in my hallway. I woke up to the sound of my name being called. A soft, familiar rasp coming from just outside my bedroom door. My chest tightened as I turned my head toward the noise, and there it was. Not the creature. No, this was worse. It was me, standing in the hallway, bathed in the pale glow of the streetlight leaking through the blinds. My exact height, my exact build, wearing my clothes from that night. The only difference was the grin, unnatural, stretched too wide across its face, as if it had learned to smile from watching something that didn't quite understand human emotions. "Liam," it said in my voice, "you should have stayed in the warehouse." I froze. My body screamed at me to move, to run, but I couldn't. All I could do was watch as it stepped closer, its movements jerky, like a puppet on broken strings. It reached the foot of my bed and tilted its head, staring down at me. Then, without a sound, it turned and walked back into the hallway, disappearing into the shadows. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Since then, it's been following me. I see it on street corners, standing too still. I catch its reflection in mirrors and windows, even when I'm alone. It's always watching, always waiting. And the worst part is getting bolder. Last night, I heard it in my apartment again. This time, it wasn't outside the door. It was inside, standing at the foot of my bed when I woke up. "Liam," it whispered, leaning in close. "You don't belong here anymore. I don't know what it wants or why it hasn't killed me yet. Maybe it's toying with me, or maybe it's waiting for something. But one thing is clear, whatever that thing was in the warehouse, I brought it back with me. So now, every night, I sit in the dark, clutching a flashlight and a heavy wrench, listening to the faint sound of footsteps circling my apartment. And I wonder, how long can I keep this up? How long before it decides I've outlived my usefulness? How long before I disappear into the dark, just like the others? I couldn't take it anymore. Every shadow, every faint sound, every time I caught that thing watching me, it was breaking me piece by piece. I needed answers, needed to figure out what it wanted, or I wasn't going to survive. So I did the one thing I swore I'd never do. I went back to the warehouse. The drive there felt surreal, like I was heading to my own execution. The roads were empty, the city unnaturally quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. When I pulled into the gravel lot, the sight of the warehouse made my stomach churn. It looked worse than I remembered. Boarded up windows, the loading dock sealed with massive chains. And yet, that faint, black stain was still there, untouched by time or weather. I hesitated, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, but I knew I couldn't. Not anymore. I grabbed a flashlight and a crowbar from the trunk and approached the side entrance. The lock was rusted, but with enough force, I pried it open. The interior smelled of mildew and rot, the faint metallic tang of something far worse lingering in the air. My footsteps echoed as I stepped inside, my flashlight cutting through the oppressive darkness. The aisles were the same, but emptier now, stripped of inventory and left to decay. Dust swirled in the beam of light as I moved deeper, every nerve in my body on high alert. And then I saw it, the canister. It was still there, sitting in the same aisle where I'd first found it. Only now it was cracked wide open, the black liquid dried into jagged streaks across the floor. As I stepped closer, the hum returned, faint but growing louder with every step. "Liam!" The voice echoed from somewhere behind me. I whipped around, crowbar raised, but there was nothing there, just rows of empty shelves stretching into the dark. "Liam!" It whispered again, this time from ahead of me. I turned back, and my heart nearly stopped. The creature was there, standing beside the canister. His body was more defined now, less liquid and more solid. It was taller, broader, almost human in shape. But its face was mine, perfectly mirrored, down to the faint scar on my eyebrow from a childhood bike accident. "You brought me back," it said in my voice, grinning that same horrifying grin. "You and we're connected now." I tightened my grip on the crowbar, my breathing ragged. "What do you want from me?" It tilted its head, almost playfully. "To show you the truth. To show you what you really are." "What the hell are you talking about?" I snapped, though my voice wavered. It stepped closer, the hum growing deafening now. "You didn't think you walked out of here that night, did you?" My blood ran cold. "What?" I whispered. "You never left," it said, the grin widening. "You've been mine since the moment you opened that door." I shook my head, backing away. No, I got out. I survived." It laughed, a sound that twisted into a distorted, guttural echo. "Did you? Or are you just pretending?" The memories of that night flashed in my mind. The creature's claws, the darkness, the pain, and then waking up outside, with no one around to explain how I'd gotten there. I wanted to scream, to tell it to shut up, but a deep, gnawing doubt had already taken root. "You belong here now," it said, its voice softer, almost gentle. "Stop fighting it. Stop pretending." The hum grew unbearable, vibrating through my skull as the black liquid began to seep from the walls, pooling at my feet. It crawled up my legs, cold and suffocating, pulling me toward the canister. I thrashed, swinging the crowbar wildly, but it was useless. The creature watched with that awful grin as the liquid dragged me closer. "No!" I screamed, clawing at the floor. "This isn't real. It's not real." But as the darkness swallowed me, I realized the truth. I never made it out of the warehouse that night. Whatever I was, whoever I was, had been left behind, a fragment of the person who once existed. And now I was going back to where I belonged. 2 weeks later, the warehouse has been reopened. A new hire, a young guy named Jason, is covering the night shift. The cameras in the security room flicker to life, showing empty aisles and shelves. And then, in the corner of one monitor, a figure appears. It looks like Jason, but its grin is too wide, and its eyes are watching the camera. Jason didn't notice the figure on the monitor at first. He was too busy yawning, scrolling his phone, and cursing the decision to take a job that felt more like punishment than employment. The warehouse was silent, save for the hum of the old fluorescent lights that flickered now and then, like they were trying to warn him. But the figure on the monitor, it wasn't idle. It stood at the far end of an aisle, shrouded in the warehouse's shadows. Jason stretched, glanced up at the screens, and froze. The figure had moved. Now it was closer, several aisles closer. What the hell?" he muttered, leaning forward to get a better look. The screen's resolution was terrible, but he could make out enough. The thing was him. Same clothes, same face. But its posture was off, too stiff. And its grin. Jason shivered. "Hey, is this a joke? Someone messing with me?" he called out, his voice bouncing through the empty warehouse. No answer. He stared at the monitor again, heart pounding. The figure wasn't there anymore. Jason shot up from his chair, grabbing the flashlight off the desk. His breathing was shallow as he scanned the room, the flashlight's beam swinging wildly. "Hello? If someone's here, this isn't funny." His voice cracked as the sound of something clattering echoed through the warehouse. Came from aisle 6, the same aisle where Liam first found the canister. Jason stepped cautiously into the labyrinth of shelves, the flashlight barely cutting through the suffocating dark. His footsteps sounded too loud, his shadow too long. At the end of the aisle, something glinted on the floor, a puddle of thick, black liquid, its surface rippling even though there was no wind. "What the?" Jason whispered, his voice trailing off. The puddle began to expand, stretching toward his boots like it was alive. He stumbled back, nearly tripping over a loose box. And then he heard it. "Jason." The voice wasn't human. It was distorted, metallic, like a recording played backward. It came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Jason whipped around, and there it was. The figure stepped out of the shadows, impossibly tall now, its limbs elongated and twisted. Its face was Jason's, but its grin stretched ear to ear, splitting its flesh as black liquid oozed down its chin. It tilted its head, watching him with unblinking, hollow eyes. "Run!" It rasped in Jason's voice, mocking him. Jason didn't need to be told twice. He turned and sprinted, his boots skidding on the concrete as he bolted toward the exit. The sound of wet, slithering footsteps chased him, growing louder, faster. The exit door was in sight. He reached it, slamming his hand against the bar. It didn't budge. "No, no, no!" Jason screamed, pounding on the door. The footsteps stopped. Jason turned slowly, his flashlight trembling in his hand. The figure stood just feet away, its grin impossibly wide now, jagged teeth gleaming beneath its distorted face. Black liquid dripped from its body, pooling at its feet. "Welcome," it whispered. The lights in the warehouse flickered, and Jason felt the floor shift beneath him. The walls stretched, twisted, as the shadows grew thicker, swallowing the shelves, the aisles, everything. And then the figure lunged. 3 months later, the warehouse remains closed. Officially, it's due to structural concerns after a supposed electrical fire. But the locals know better. There are rumors about what really happened. Whispers of strange noises, figures seen moving inside late at night. Stories of workers who went in and never came out. No one knows what happened to Jason or Liam. But sometimes, when the wind is just right, people swear they hear it. A voice, faint and hollow, calling out from the darkness. "Come work the night shift. We're waiting for you."